Yan Yuan looked up in the direction of the voice, and said clearly, Yan Yuan thanks the Prince Regent. Yan Yuan looked up in the direction of the voice, and said clearly, Yan Yuan thanks the Prince Regent. Afterward, he stepped forward and walked straight past Li Jing. Li Jing did not stop him. The Prince Regent himself had spoken, so the others would not stop them. Furthermore, unless the Prince Regent came out personally, other people in the residence perhaps would not be able to stop Yan Yuan. Dong! Yan Yuan threw out his palm, and the pagoda made a crystal-clear sound. Immediately following, a divine implement was shattered, and the pressure on Yi Futian disappeared instantly. He looked at Yan Yuan and called out, "Brother." Yan Yuan nodded gently and said, "Let's go." Yi Futian hastened his steps and followed Yan Yan, who had turned to walk away. Mr. Nan Zhai and Mu Chunyang cast a glance at the rest of the people, and Mu Chunyang said, "If anyone disagrees with Imperial Advisor's residence, please be open and upfront. The disciples of Imperial Advisor's residence respect the Prince Regent, so I hope that the people of the residence will not shame the name of the Prince Regent." Having said that, the four stepped directly into the void and left. It seemed as if Dali Imperial City was a place that they could come and go at will. Everyone at Prince Regent's residence looked at the sight of Yan Yuan and the others leaving, and they were feeling quite revolted. Some of the elders of the palace, who were of the Saint Plain, had experienced the prosperous days when the Prince Regent's residence was in charge of the kingdom. However, the people of Dali dynasty had long forgotten its glorious past. They only knew of the imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty, who was just beneath one person, but above all the rest. As to the disciples of the imperial advisor who dared to be so forthright, that after having killed the grandson of the Prince Regent, they dared to defy others' opinions and forcibly taken the one who murdered Li Xian. This was why many of the sovereign family had objections toward the imperial advisor of Dali. The imperial advisor had already wielded power that surpassed the power of the sovereign family. But for this, the Prince Regent had never expressed any opinions. In the past few years, he had not bothered with the matters of the kingdom. Many people had said that the Prince Regent was ready to retire and focus on cultivating in peace. At this time, Li Su had gotten up from the ground, the corner of his mouth was still bloody. Even as a cultivator of Saint Plain, he could not hold back his emotions at this moment. Great hatred filled his heart. His brother Li Xian was killed, and now they trespassed and wounded him, destroyed a divine implement, and took away the seventh swordsman. This was what Yan Yuan had done this day. Li Jing did not say anything, but turned around and walked away. After a while, Li Jing appeared in another courtyard. It was very quiet. An old man sat quietly on the ground, his back facing Li Jing, his eyes closed in meditation. There was not the slightest sense of majesty from his person, not at all like the Prince Regent, whose power was once toppling the kingdom. "Father," he called. Li Xian, who was slain, was his son, and Li Su, who was wounded, was also his son. The Prince Regent was still sitting with his back facing him, and there was not a trace of disturbance about him. He said, "Losing is losing. If you lost, you must admit it." Li Su and Li Xian did not complete their mission and left evidence behind, that's why they have to pay the price. In the eyes of the Prince Regent, there was neither right nor wrong, only success or failure. Li Su and Li Xian wanted to kill the disciple of the imperial advisor, but not only did they not succeed, but they were also killed by the target and left evidence behind. This was undoubtedly a failure. Both the Prince Regent's residence and the imperial advisor's residence were in service to Emperor Li. The struggle was like a game. The two sides that played had to abide by the rules of the game and not cross the boundaries. Li Xian did cross that boundary, so he could only die in vain. Otherwise, the dispute between the imperial advisor and the Prince Regent, vying for power in the face of the emperor, that would also be a disgrace to the Prince Regent's residence. Yan Yuan dared to be so aggressive and arrogant as to come to the Prince Regent's residence to take away the prisoner, precisely because he had reason on his side, with all the advantages, so he was not afraid of contention. Li Jing understood this. But the one who died was his son, so it was natural that he was angry. Father has stopped inquiring about the matters of the dynasty for many years. Now, when this matter comes out, how will the world view Prince Regent's residence? Li Jing asked. Even he could not understand his father's mind. What does the view of the world has anything to do with the Prince Regent's residence? The voice of the old man was still calm. It was as if he had experienced a lifetime's worth of trials. Li Jing, you must remember that Prince Regent's residence or the Imperial Advisor's residence both serve His Majesty. That is all. What is the status of my position, and what is the status of the Imperial Advisor? Today, the Imperial Advisor is more useful to His Majesty. Whoever disregards the rules is disregarding His Majesty. Do you understand? Hearing this voice, Li Jing's heart trembled, and he looked at his father. The old man in front of him seemed to see things more clearly than anyone else. So over the years, he had stopped inquiring about matters of the outside world and no longer fought for anything. Many people thought that he had chosen to cultivate in solitude instead. But in fact, he had already seen through everything. Whether it was the Prince Regent or the Imperial Advisor, they were all for the sake of the Emperor, nothing more. Remember, some things cannot be obtained simply because you fight for it. The kids thought they were sharper than me. Do you think I need them to remind me of anything? The Prince Regent continued to speak. His extreme coolness was nearly frightening to behold. Even though his grandson had died, it did not seem to upset him much. One day, when His Majesty thinks that I am useful again, I will be present again, the Prince Regent continued. Do you understand? Li Jing sighed in his heart. It was very cruel but very realistic. Go back, seeing that there was no response from Li Jing. The Prince Regent dismissed him lightly. Li Jing turned to leave. After he left, the Prince Regent opened his eyes, and they were extremely sharp. When he got into a match with someone on the level of the Imperial Advisor, it was not a simple matter of who suppressed whom, but whoever made the wrong move first. What Li Xian did was making the wrong move, and it was beyond stupid. Therefore, death was his destination. Yan Yuan and the others traveled in the air after they left Prince Regent's residence. Mr. Nan Zhai asked Yi Futian, "How is your injury?" "I'm fine," Yi Futian responded. All this was still owing to his strong physique that was comparable to that of the saints. If it were not so, he was probably already disabled. That's good to hear, Mr. Nan Zhai nodded. Senior brother, I killed Li Xian. Will it involve the Imperial Advisor's residence? Yi Futian asked. Don't worry. Whether you killed Li Xian or not, there is no impact on the Imperial Advisor's residence, Yan Yuan replied. Yi Futian looked up at Yan Yuan and was somewhat puzzled. The world said that the Prince Regent no longer concerned himself with matters of the state and thought that he resides in solitude. But this once powerful prince was far more clever than the world imagined. Li Xian had overstepped the boundaries. His death was unimportant. Yan Yuan continued, he thought that he could change things, but what went on between our master and the Prince Regent was not something the younger generation could resolve. He lacked self-awareness. Yi Futian seemed somewhat befuddled, but still nodded. Yan Yuan turned his eyes toward him. Li Xian thought that he could fight for something, but younger brother, you must remember, the best fight in this world is just to cultivate. Yi Futian looked at Yan Yuan, and for a moment, it seemed that time and space had turned back to many years ago. His third brother once told him that whatever was the biggest in the world could claim the truth. If there was anything bigger than the truth, then it had to be a fist. In the world of the cultivators, the best fight was cultivation. These two conclusions had the same meaning. Therefore, the disciples of the Imperial Advisor's residence seemed to have no contention with the world and were cultivating in peace. They did not deign to jump up and down and all around like Li Xian. This was probably a difference in realms. The news that Yan Yuan had taken Yi Futian from Prince Regent's residence quickly spread out, causing huge waves instantly. Many people of the Dali imperial city felt that they were indeed the chief disciples of the Imperial Advisor and had trespassed in the Prince Regent's residence to take away their person. Below the Nirvana Saint Plain, could there be a second? Yan Yuan and the group returned to Dali Academy. Although the people of Dali Academy were excited, they were not too shocked. Since the senior brother himself had gone, then they would naturally bring back their person. The Dali Academy belonged to those who were friendly toward the imperial advisor. As for Yen Yuan, who managed Dali Academy, all of them worshipped him from the bottom of their hearts. Seventh Swordsman, Li Yao called when he saw Yi Futian returning safely. Gratitude for all the troubles your highness went through on account of me. Yi Futian bowed slightly. Li Yao waved his hand. Your safe return was the most important thing. It was too impulsive of you to have killed Li Xian. Li Xian, after all, was a royal descendant. If the people of Prince Regent's residence were mad enough to kill Yi Futian first, then it would have been too late to do anything. Your Highness, if I did not subdue Li Xian, I would be a dead man already. Since it was destined that one man must die, then this was the only way it could be. Yi Futian responded. Li Yao said nothing more. He added, since you have returned safely, I shall be leaving. Once finished, he bowed to Yen Yuan and the others. Senior brother, I am leaving now. His Highness, return safely, Yen Yuan said. Brother, you have suffered some injuries, rest early, Yen Yuan said to Yi Futian. Yes, senior brother. Yi Futian nodded and turned to leave. I am leaving too, said Lu Chuan, who was next to him. He left with Yi Futian. He walked next to Yi Futian. What you did was a little too risky. With the master and senior brothers around, what do I need to be afraid of? Yi Futian laughed. You are not the least bit humble, Lu Chuan smiled and said, but you weren't wrong. No matter what you did, the brothers will always be there for you. What if I did something wrong? Yi Futian said. As long as it is not a great mistake that betrays the master, then it is the same, just like the day when the master promised to accept you as a disciple. Yi Futian was silent, thoughtful in his heart. Do you know anything about the fourth senior brother? Lu Chuan suddenly asked. What of the fourth brother? Yi Futian asked. He had always been curious about Wang Zhong. He and the other disciples of the imperial advisor seemed out of place. The master has the ability to make death warriors. The father of the fourth brother was a death warrior, and he died many years ago. The fourth brother always hated the master, but the master still accepted him as a disciple and passed on his martial arts to him. Slowly Lu Chuan said, the master is like this. He doesn't even care. Maybe one day, when the fourth brother turns on him, he will still be indifferent. Of course, if there is such a day, I, along with our other brothers, will definitely do things for the master that he does not want to do. Yi Futian was a little surprised. He didn't expect Wang Zhong to have such a story. He glanced at the Lu Chuan, who was next to him, and said, I believe that the fourth brother will not do this. Lu Chuan looked ahead calmly and said softly, Master took each person as a disciple for a reason. I don't want brothers to stand opposite of each other one day, either. Lu Chuan looked ahead calmly and said softly, Master took each person as a disciple for a reason. I don't want brothers to stand opposite of each other one day, either. Yi Futian thought for a while and said, Master doesn't seem to like violence, but why does he cultivate death warriors? As Master has said before, there is a price for everything you want to do. Whether there is master or not, death warriors always exist, serving the army or born and raised for such purpose. What Master does is to make them stronger. There are even some death warriors in the army who knew they were not able to make any progress in cultivation in their lifetimes and rather chose to receive Master's transformation. Lu Chuan continued, but, even so, Master admits it is against the law of heaven and announces he will only cultivate them when there is war, like the Battle of Empty Realm, or when the sovereign family ordered so. Do you know why King Tiandao has a deep grudge with Master? Why? Asked Yi Futian. King Tiandao rules the army of the West, which is the strongest army outside the imperial city. He wants to build an army of death gods and hopes Master can help. He even thinks that the Master can transform not only sages but also saints. King Tiandao has tried to counsel the emperor many times to give Master pressure, but Master rejected. So to speak, when Di Hao defeated Dong Chen, he requested to become the imperial advisor's disciple. Was this the reason? Asked Yi Futian. Di Hao's things suddenly came to his mind, although at that time, after the imperial advisor asked both of them why they sought the way, imperial advisor chose Yi instead of him. Maybe, Lu Chuan said. Then can master transform Saint Plain cultivators? Yi Futian asked, looking at Lu Chuan. Saint Plain cultivators have taken the crucial step and refined their physiques, they have infinite potential. Whether yes or no, master will not do it, Lu Chuan replied. So, the answer is no. I see. Yi Futian nodded. After they chatted a while, Yi Futian went to cultivate alone. Although his physique was powerful, he was seriously injured by the divine implement's will, and he needed time to recover. The incident soon subsided, and no direct conflict had happened between Regent King and Imperial Advisor, otherwise, that would be a crisis. Year 10,022 of the Divine Prefecture calendar was approaching its end. The finely decorated imperial city of Dali was even busier than usual. The tradition of celebrating the end of a year had lasted for more than 10,000 years since the start of the Divine Prefecture calendar. Similar customs were widespread throughout all realms of the Divine Prefecture, though some realms didn't think it as important as other realms did. However, if conditions allowed, having at least a simple gathering was a must for everybody. On the last day of the year, gorgeous lamps lit up the palace of the Dali dynasty, graceful dancers danced to festive songs, members of the royal clan and courtiers all gathered in the palace to celebrate the new year. However, the imperial advisor didn't come, and nobody would blame his absence because nobody dared to. All royal clan members knew the imperial advisor didn't like being surrounded by many people. At the end of every year, he would wake up his sleeping daughter and celebrate the new year with her. Emperor Li had asked the imperial advisor about his daughter's issue, but the imperial advisor declined his help. The imperial advisor claimed his daughter's illness was incurable, even Ren Huang couldn't do anything about it. Nobody doubted what the imperial advisor said. If there had been a solution, how could the imperial advisor have wasted his own daughter's time? Everyone also wondered, what kind of illness did the imperial advisor's daughter have? In the imperial advisor's residence, it was cozy and peaceful. The imperial advisor just had a dinner gathering with his disciples. People returned home. The imperial advisor stayed with Fei Shui in the courtyard. Both of them sat on the ground in a relaxed manner and looked up at the stars above. When fireworks exploded, glittering stars seemed to dim, but nobody knew if Fei Shui could see them. Master, did you want to see me? Yi Futian came and asked. Come, sit by me, the Dali imperial advisor laughed and said. Yi Futian nodded and sat next to the imperial advisor. A slight smile rose on Fei Shui's face. It was the second time Yi Futian saw her awake. He felt a tinge of pity and sadness for her. I heard you went to West Mountain alone a few days ago, and you challenged Demon Saint, the imperial advisor asked. It was very hard. When confronting the Demon Saint, I could only survive. My level still restricts my ability, Yi Futian replied. The gap between Saint and Sage is indeed hard to measure. Now, you can battle with Demon Saint and even survive before the Candle Dragon Demon Saint. It is very rare. Perhaps you are the only one in the 100 years history of Dali dynasty, said the imperial advisor. But I am still just a sage, and I am still unable to enter the Saint Plane. Cultivation is an accumulative process. It needs time to grow. To enter the Saint Plane, you need a chance that conforms to the Great Path, and there is no need to hurry. The imperial advisor continued, I haven't taught you anything since you became my disciple. Today, I will teach you one chapter of my cultivation method. Master, I have cultivation methods of my own, and your way of cultivation may not suit me, said Yi Futian, who didn't immediately accept with delight. He would have been inwardly thrilled when he had just reached Dali and learned the best teachings about cultivation from the Dali imperial advisor. However, the imperial advisor's teaching made him feel shame. If it doesn't suit you, I will not teach you, imperial advisor said, laughing. My cultivation method is called the deed of thorough comprehension, which contains all aspects of the world. There are several chapters, including the energy of metaphysical practices, which can help you perceive the existence of all beings, observe the change of stars, and foretell one's fortune. But there is only one chapter that I will teach you, and it suits you best. Through it, you can use your body as a cauldron, your soul as a guide, the 5 elements of the great path as the air to produce the power of heaven and earth, and connect you to the great law of the universe and sharpen your sense to the world. When you fight, your body as the cauldron will flame and borrow energy from the law of the world. If I am not wrong, this chapter will suit you very well. In awe, Yi Futian looked toward the imperial advisor. It was said that the imperial advisor was extremely knowledgeable and proficient in many skills. There was even hearsay about his uncanny abilities. Yi Futian, as a cultivator of such level, of course, didn't believe the rumors and assumed his ability was somehow overpraised. But now it seemed, imperial advisor indeed had special cultivation skills. The deed of thorough comprehension should be extraordinary. And the imperial advisor claimed he could see one's fortune from the change of stars. Did it mean he could tell Yi Futian's fortune? Did Master take me as your disciple because of not only my belief in swordsmanship but also my fortune? Said Yi Futian. The strength of one's fortune doesn't mean anything. It's not about it, the imperial advisor said. Yi Futian nodded. Even though the mysterious method could measure one's fortune, very likely, it was a rough estimation and could not see one's destiny. Even very powerful astrologers were not able to do so, they could only make a rough guess. I will teach you the cultivation method, the imperial advisor said. Yi Futian nodded, and soon he felt a strong spiritual power that covered his body. Beams of light emitted from the middle of the imperial advisor's eyebrows and shot toward the center of Yi Futian's brow. Suddenly, a lot of things came to Yi Futian's mind. The path was only taught to the chosen one, the law didn't come to unwanted ears. Imperial advisor thought Yi Futian was the one, so he taught him in person. Yi Futian closed his eyes and perceived some moments. The next time he opened his eyes, the imperial advisor was gone. Fei Shui was still there, facing him. If she could have seen, her eyes must have been more beautiful. Where is Master? Asked Yi Futian. He has gone to rest, said Fei Shui. How long did I meditate? Said Yi Futian. Half an hour, Fei Shui replied. Yi Futian nodded slightly and looked toward where the imperial advisor had been. He was going to make more inquiries. My father told me to pass on the message. When you hesitate, just follow your heart and do what you feel in your heart to be right. Otherwise, the imperfection in your state of mind will affect your cultivation, Fei Shui said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian's heart sank for a moment. He looked at Fei Shui and said, grinning, Master has noticed. Have you seen any disciple evade learning from their master? Fei Shui put a smile on her face and said, and don't forget, I can sense the fluctuation of your emotions. Yi Futian shrugged, he seemed not to mind it. Maybe, he was indeed full of himself, nothing in the world could be flawless. Even though the imperial advisor might not know his identity or didn't expect that he came from Emperor Xia's realm, how could he be unaware of anything when he just cultivated beside him? Human beings couldn't be empty of emotions, and emotional transitions were detectable. If the imperial advisor had known he came to the Great Li to kill Li Yao, would he have told you to follow his heart and do what his heart would not regret? So you mean, I have no secrets in front of you? Asked Yi Futian, laughing. Yes, Fei Shui laughed and replied. Since I have no secret from you, shouldn't you share some of your secrets with me? Said Yi Futian. Why does the thing in your body make you keep sleeping to survive? You want to help me? Said Fei Shui. She was surprised by Yi Futian's feeling that she sensed. She chuckled at the idea in his mind. Even her father, a Ren Huang, could do nothing about it, and this guy wanted to help her. Even though there is no solution, someday, maybe we will find it, Yi Futian said seriously. Fei Shui could sense his warm-heartedness, which was from the bottom of his heart. She was never wrong about people's feelings. That was the true emotion from the heart, he couldn't fake it. As I told you last time, the thing in my body is inauspicious. In fact, the inauspicious thing is a treasure that has merged into my body, and because of it, my perception is more accurate and sharper than anyone else's. I can perceive not only human emotions but also the existence of everything in the universe and absorb energy from them. However, the energy is too much, and once it explodes, my plane cannot support my body to endure this energy, and I will perish. That's why my father lets me sleep to avoid it, Fei Shui confessed to Yi Futian. She then laughed and said, "Now, you also know my secret." Last time Yi Futian guessed it right. This thing could make the world tree shake, which had never happened before. Even the imperial advisor and Ren Huang had no solution for the thing in Fei Shui's body, so one could imagine how valuable it was. Even the imperial advisor and Ren Huang had no solution for the thing in Fei Shui's body, so one could imagine how valuable it was. "Is it possible to take it out?" asked Yi Futian. "It has merged into my body and connected to my veins and heart. My father said it could only be taken out if I die," Fei Shui shared her secret calmly. In fact, she had slept for many years, and the actual duration of her life was very short. If not for her father, she might not have cared about life or death. Perhaps now, she lived her life only for her father. Thus, she didn't care about the secret, especially when she perceived Yi Futian's good intentions, she didn't need to hide it. "Can I perceive it?" said Yi Futian. "Yes," Fei Shui nodded, wondering how Yi Futian would do so. Soon, Fei Shui felt him holding her hand. Her arms slightly shivered, and she intrinsically wanted to retreat, but she didn't do it and just let Yi Futian hold it. An invisible life force infused into her body under his palm. There was a moment Fei Shui had a mysterious feeling. It was as if she was very intimate with him. But how could he do this? She was surprised. Meanwhile, Yi Futian was amazed by that kind of feeling, too. The world tree in his life palace waved and rustled, emitting wisps of life force out of the palace, which ran through his body, tentatively entering Fei Shui's body. It was as if his world tree spirit could do more than detect the thing in Fei Shui's body. Tens of thousands of wisps of life force were infused into Fei Shui's body continuously. It was as if they would never end. A dreamy aura surrounded Fei Shui's body, she slightly felt the treasure that had been part of her blood, and her heart seemed to be detached. It was almost ready to emerge. There was even a life flow that ran from her body to Yi Futian's. The change was unexpected by neither of them. Was Yi Futian absorbing the energy from the treasure? But how? Fei Shui was in shock. The treasure had long been merged into her body, and even her father was not able to take it out. But Yi Futian seemed to have made it. In the meantime, Yi Futian's perception of the world was changing, he could hear Fei Shui's heartbeat, sense her anxiety, and was aware of her confusion and shock. Yi Futian even saw the thing in Fei Shui's body, it was a monument without limit, bearing an inscription with no end. It was hard to see it clearly, but the law of heaven and earth seemed to hide inside. But the thing was a part of Fei Shui's body, it was hard to tell what was what, and if there had not been the world tree spirit, you would have never perceived its existence. Yi Futian opened his eyes and withdrew his life flow. He looked at Fei Shui. Fei Shui's head was lowered. Although she could not see, she was able to sense all that had happened. It was amazing that the treasure in her body could respond to Yi Futian. "So, we have similar secrets," said Yi Futian, grinning. Fei Shui laughed, too. She nodded and said, "I will keep your secret. I will not tell anyone, even my father." Yi Futian stared at this young lady's simple smiling face and sighed to himself. Then he looked up into the countless stars in the sky. The imperial advisor had a grudge with Wang Zhong, but he still took him as a disciple. The imperial advisor didn't know Yi Futian's identity and knew he might have his own agenda, but still took him as his disciple and taught him the deed of thorough comprehension. On many occasions, the meaning of life was not all about benefiting oneself. Perhaps this sounded stupid. However, this might be what the temperament of a saint meant. "Fei Shui, is there a matrix where you sleep?" asked Yi Futian. "Yes, there is a ceiling matrix," Fei Shui said, confused. I can take you to the place you sleep. Let's go, said Yi Futian, standing up. Fei Shui felt his emotions and knew he was not going to send her to sleep, but she still accompanied him to walk toward the place. Soon they came to the place where Fei Shui slept. It was a sight full of matrices. Before them stood a cold jade bed. Fei Shui walked up and sat on it. Yi Futian followed her and said, maybe I can try to take the thing from your body. Fei Shui said that the imperial advisor had told her the treasure had been part of her blood and heart, and unless she died, it was impossible to take it out. However, after Yi Futian's first attempt, he felt he could have a try again. Fei Shui was silent for a second and then asked with a laugh, are you serious? Yes, Yi Futian nodded. You can do it, Fei Shui said, smiling. If Yi Futian wanted to try, she would let him try. Even though she didn't have high expectations. They crossed their legs and sat in the matrix. Both of them closed their eyes. Wisps of life force were released from Yi Futian's body. He held Fei Shui's hands. She lowered her head but didn't stop him. Soon, the mysterious feeling reappeared. The next moment, bursts of dazzling light erupted. Fei Shui seemed to have perceived something. She softly said, what a beautiful tree. Later, her body was submerged by the giant tree. Countless branches and leaves enveloped her. The world tree spirit clasped her to its bosom. Fei Shui suddenly understood why she sensed the impurity of the seventh sword spirit. Actually, he was not a swordsman in training. His natal spirit was not even sword. Their bodies were wrapped tightly like in a cocoon, the world tree rustled and reflected resplendent luster. After a long while, a breath of horror burgeoned from here, followed by a string of clanging sound, the glare of the world tree suddenly vanished. Yi Futian withdrew his natal spirit and looked at Fei Shui, from whom a beam of bright light shot into the sky. Fei Shui, the imperial advisor called. Yi Futian swiftly left the bed and walked away. In a hurry, imperial advisor took a glance at him and walked straight to Fei Shui. Yi Futian directly returned to his residence. He would not go away, but he had no idea how to face the imperial advisor either. As the imperial advisor had told him, he just did what his heart felt was right. Yi Futian closed his eyes. In his life palace, the world tree rustled in the wind. He wondered what the natal spirit actually was. A radiant beam of light came out of a corner in the imperial advisor's residence and penetrated the sky. People came outside and gathered, wondering what had happened. Yan Yuan, Sir Nanzhai, and others came to the gate of the place where Fei Shui slept and requested to see Master. None of them knew what happened. Nothing serious. I am checking Fei Shui's status. You can all leave, said the imperial advisor. Yes, sir, Yan Yuan nodded and said. They saw nothing wrong, and soon all returned. In Imperial Xia's palace, Emperor Xia's realm, Xia Qingyuan summoned Black Wind Condor after she had just returned from a royal banquet to her own princess residence. Sir Condor felt embarrassed to death. Was he her slave? What are you doing now? Xia Qingyuan asked Black Wind Condor. Black Wind Condor knew she was not talking to him, so he sent a message to Yi Futian. Soon after, Black Wind Condor closed his eyes and reopened them. He looked kind of different. I am cultivating, said Condor. Today is the last day of the year. You should be in the Imperial Advisor residence, right? How does it feel to celebrate the new year in the Imperial Advisor residence? Asked Xia Qingyuan. Yi Futian sensed from her tone that she was not very happy, so he said, not bad. The Imperial Advisor just taught me his cultivation method. Xia Qingyuan was stunned for a second and said, staring at the Black Wind Condor, so the Imperial Advisor really appreciates you. No wonder you don't want to come back. The Imperial Advisor residence treats me very well, indeed, Yi Futian said inside. Don't tell me you are thinking about it, said Xia Qingyuan, staring at the Black Wind Condor. Did this be *** starred really have some emotional connection with the Imperial Advisor residence? Black-winged condor looked at Xia Qingyuan and didn't answer. Later, he asked, "What's the matter this time?" Xia Qingyuan stared at him and said coldly, "Nothing." "If so, I should go now," Yi Futian said. "You." Xia Qingyuan clenched her fists and hoped she could punch him. "About that thing, I found a clue," said Xia Qingyuan. She referred to the last time's incident with Xiao Sheng. Black-winged condor narrowed his eyes and said, "Tell me more." "We are still investigating. I will tell you if we have results." "Fine." Black-winged condor nodded and replied, "Thank you for your efforts these days, Your Highness." Xia Qingyuan looked into Black-winged condor's eyes and felt somehow relieved. On the last day of the year, she skipped slapping the condor. It was the first day of year 10,023 of the Divine Prefecture calendar. In the Imperial Advisor residence, Dali Imperial City. Yan Yuan, Sir Nan Zhai, Mu Chunyang, and others came to visit the Imperial Advisor. When they set foot in the courtyard, they saw a slim figure quietly standing beside the Imperial Advisor. Of course, it was Fei Shui. Fei Shui. Yan Yuan and others showed surprise. She was not sleeping. What had happened yesterday? Fei Shui's thing had been settled. From today, Fei Shui will no longer need to extend her life by sleep, said Imperial Advisor with a heartfelt smile. From now on, his daughter Fei Shui would be normal except for her blindness. Yesterday, he just couldn't believe it when he saw this. He even had no idea what Yi Futian had done. He didn't ask, and Fei Shui didn't tell him either. Yan Yuan and others first paused a second, and then every one of them smiled. Did it mean Fei Shui would no longer need to sleep? Although they didn't know what had happened yesterday, since Master said it was settled, it should have been settled. "Where is the seventh swordsman?" asked the Imperial Advisor. "Master," Yi Futian called from a distance. He came closer, bowed, and said, "The seventh swordsman is here to greet Master and brothers." "Good. Have you cultivated on the deed of thorough comprehension?" the Imperial Advisor asked as if nothing had happened yesterday evening. "Yes, but it is a little abstruse for me, and I am afraid I need some time," replied Yi Futian. "The deed of thorough comprehension is indeed not easy to understand. You have to focus on it," said the Imperial Advisor. Yi Futian nodded. Yi Futian's eyes turned to Fei Shui. He noticed Fei Shui was also looking at him. Yi Futian's eyes turned to Fei Shui. He noticed Fei Shui was also looking at him. "I haven't told my father anything yet," Fei Shui whispered to Yi Futian. Yi Futian could tell there was something playful about her tone. She must be in a good mood since she finally could live a normal life as others did. From now on, she could always keep her father company and no longer needed to sleep. Yi Futian chuckled to himself. Fei Shui didn't tell her father anything, and the Imperial Advisor didn't ask. It was as if nothing had happened yesterday. Even those elder brothers had no idea what happened. However, the Imperial Advisor must have felt something even if he was not told. At least, he knew the seventh sword was not merely a swordsman in training. Even so, the Imperial Advisor didn't ask. "Thank you," Yi Futian replied in a whisper. "Can your eyes be healed?" "I should be the one to thank you," said Fei Shui. "My eyes were damaged by the treasure's energy when it came into my body. I am blind, and it can't be cured, but I am already happy to live a normal life. I shouldn't expect much." As a cultivator, even though she couldn't see, she could still perceive the world. Although it was colorless, her life would not be much affected. She was delighted. The only pity was that she couldn't use her eyes to see the seventh swordman's face. Yi Futian didn't say anything, but he felt pity, too. "Have you taken out the treasure?" asked Yi Futian. "No," replied Fei Shui, "but it will no longer be part of my body and can exist separately. My father has sealed it. Although it is not completely sealed, it will no longer merge into my veins and heart and make me unable to endure it." She continued, "In my current status, I can depend on its energy to cultivate bit by bit, and as my cultivation makes progress, I can gradually release the sealed energy and grow up with it. Such an outcome was, of course, the best for her. The treasure had been utterly connected to Fei Shue's veins and heart in the past, so sealing it would have meant sealing her life and putting her to sleep. After Yi Futian removed it from Fei Shue's body with the power of World Tree, it became independent. Yi Futian could even take it away as his own since the treasure was more attractive to the World Tree than to Fei Shue's body, which was the reason why it was taken out. But this invaluable treasure belonged to Fei Shui. Yi Futian didn't take it but left right after he did his job, letting the imperial advisor finish the job. Apparently, after the thing was removed, the imperial advisor did a nice job. Good things come one after another, said Sir Nan Zhai with a laugh. Master finally cured Fei Shui and would no longer worry about her situation every day. And the junior brother, the seventh swordsman, even got the opportunity to learn about Master's deed of thorough comprehension, which was Master's core cultivation method and contained mysterious knowledge that could change the nature's fortune. Sir Nan Zhai cultivated on one chapter as well, but so far, he had not totally comprehended it. The first day of the new year is indeed a lucky one, Yan Yuan said, smiling. Apparently, everyone was happy for Master and Fei Shui. Lu Chuan took a glance at Yi Futian and thought something might have happened yesterday. However, it didn't matter. The imperial advisor had a smile on his face, he hadn't been so happy for a long time. Although his power had spread across the Dali dynasty, imperial advisor was actually quite disengaged with politics. For him, power was nothing but fleeting clouds. Today is the first day of the new year, and the court of Dali dynasty will begin today. Seventh Swordmans, why don't you come with me, the imperial advisor said to Yi Futian. Since Yi Futian had become the imperial advisor's direct disciple, he had gained his status in the Dali dynasty and was supposed to go to see Emperor Li. Yes, master, Yi Futian nodded. Let's go then, the imperial advisor said. He smiled and turned to Fei Shui. You stay at home and rest. Okay, Fei Shui said, nodding. The imperial advisor gently stroked her head with love and then steered his sword toward the direction of Dali Imperial City with his disciples. Besides the imperial advisor, in Emperor Li Avenue district, masters were coming out of residences and steering their swords in the air in the same direction. On the first day of every new year, all the officials in Dali dynasty came to pay homage to the court. On this day, in the lavish Dali Imperial Palace, a broad path stretched from the sky. All cultivators steered their swords in the air toward the palace following the path. Numerous, rarely seen, big figures all attended this ceremony. The imperial advisor and disciples arrived a little late, and many people were already in the palace. They got off of their swords, and immediately many people outside the palace bowed toward imperial advisor and greeted, "Hail, imperial advisor." The imperial advisor slightly nodded and led Yan Yuan and others to walk forward. The people walking ahead of them all stopped and stepped aside to let the imperial advisor go first to show respect. In addition to the imperial advisor, his disciples caught many people's eyes as well. Yan Yuan was the imperial advisor's chief disciple. In Dali, his name weighed a lot. Not long ago, he broke into the Prince Regent's residence with two junior brothers without the imperial advisor's involvement. How daring! As the figure who had stirred up a storm not long before, Yi Futian was the most famed among young elites and also captured some attention. He hunted in the West Mountain and decapitated Li Xian. How contemptuous! His interest in victory was as keen as his sword. They walked straight to the palace. It was the second time Yi Futian came to the Dali Imperial Palace, but compared with the last time that Li Yao met with Yi Futian and others in a relaxed manner, today the atmosphere was obviously more solemn and tense. That day's meeting was a trial among young elites. This time's ceremony was for all to pay homage to the Dali court. Giant golden dragon patterns engraved on the ground displayed their sharp fangs and claws. The most prominent figures of Dali dynasty stood on both sides of the central path. Behind them were rows of pillars, each carved with one golden holy dragon. In front of them was a lofty staircase that led to a magnificent palace sitting above the clouds. Many royal clan members had also appeared on both sides of the path. They looked in the direction of Imperial Advisor, with coldness in their eyes. The thing that happened last time let them witness the power of the Imperial Advisor's residence. After killing the Prince Regent's offspring, Yan Yuan beat Li Su and led his people to leave, and even raved that he would not punish others' wrongs. How brazen they were! Thus, most royal clan members were piqued by them. Even so, when the middle-aged figure walked past them, without a slight essence of life force, nobody dared to look into his eyes. They all lowered their heads. Not to mention the Imperial Advisor, how many people present today were comparable with the disciple Yan Yuan, who stood behind the Imperial Advisor? Imperial Advisor, people in the crowd greeted and bowed to him. Many people looked toward the Prince Regent, who was standing in the front line. The people of Prince Regent's residence stood behind Prince Regent, including Li Su. Having just noticed the Imperial Advisor's arrival, the Prince Regent turned around to look at him. He smiled, showing no trace of a grudge. He made a fist salute slowly and greeted, Imperial Advisor. Imperial Advisor paused and replied to him with a fist salute, Your Highness. And then they stood shoulder to shoulder in the front of the crowd. Yan Yuan and others didn't follow behind, instead, they stood in the crowd at a distance from the Imperial Advisor. At the front, a prince appeared from the side and showed courtesy to the Prince Regent and the Imperial Advisor. Li Yao was also present. He looked at the crowd and slightly nodded to Yi Futian when he saw him. Yi Futian nodded to him as a reply. At the same time, another group of people arrived. One of the two persons who led the group was the third prince. The other person had a rather imposing physical appearance and domineering manner. He took a glance at the crowd, and many people didn't even dare to face him. They lowered their heads. He strode directly over to the Prince Regent, made a fist salute, and greeted, Uncle. Prince Regent gave a smile and asked, How did you have time to come here from the land of West this time? The person was King Tingdao among the four kings. I have some important issues to report to His Majesty, said Tiandao with a laugh. Then his eyes turned to other people and fixed on the Imperial Advisor. He said, The Imperial Advisor is here, too. Imperial Advisor nodded as a reply. King Tiandao stood next to them in the front line. Soon, King White arrived, too. One advisor and 4 kings of Dali dynasty had all arrived, except King Li. King Li was busy with issues in the lower worlds, so he usually didn't show up. Suddenly, the crowd quieted down and stood back to watch a figure appear on the staircase. He stood there, almighty like a god, as if in this solemn palace, he was the only one. All hail, Your Majesty, everyone said and bowed. The person standing on the staircase was, undoubtedly, the absolute master of Dali dynasty, Emperor Li. Feel free to stand up, said Emperor Li. After 1 year, I am glad to see the graceful bearings of you all. Imperial Advisor governs the court, King Tiandao guards the border, Prince Regent and King White are also in charge. No wonder our Dali dynasty can prosper, said a courtier, smiling. Thank you for all your efforts, Imperial Advisor, Prince Regent, King Tiandao, and King White, Emperor Li said. The Imperial Advisor and 3 kings bowed and showed their gratitude. Imperial Advisor, I heard recently you took one disciple with exceptional talent who even defeated King Tiandao's foster son Di Hao. Did he come with you? Emperor Li asked, looking toward the Imperial Advisor. Imperial Advisor nodded, turned to the crowd behind him and called, 7th Swordsman. Yi Futian walked up and bowed to Emperor Li, saying, 7th Swordsman is here to greet Your Majesty. Raise your head, said Emperor Li. Yi Futian looked up. His temperament is indeed extraordinary, Emperor Li said with a laugh, nodding. Previously Imperial Advisor lost his disciple Yuan Jin on the battlefield. I feel so happy you have a new disciple now. Although she has a boyish nature, my daughter Li Xiao is at the age for marriage, too. Imperial Advisor, what do you think if I married her to 7th Swordsman? Many people were in shock at what Emperor Li had said. The 7th Swordsman had just offended Prince Regent and killed Li Xian. Now the Emperor was going to betroth his daughter to him. This was Emperor Li's action indicated that he thought highly of the imperial advisor. Emperor Li's action indicated that he thought highly of the imperial advisor. Of course, there was no doubt that His Majesty betrothed the princess to the seventh swordsman because he was indeed an excellent man. He was the best swordsman in the lower worlds. He defeated Di Hao and survived in the hands of Demon Saint. He killed Li Xian in public. He had outstanding talent, courage, and charisma, and he was also handsome and the right age. Many people thought from this perspective and secretly admired this abrupt but wise decision of betrothal. Princess had a noble lineage, but the seventh swordsman as the imperial advisor's disciple was extraordinary, too. In Dali dynasty, perhaps no one was more suitable than him. Many royal clan members raised their head, shocked at the words, but who dared to question Emperor Li? Yi Futian was also stunned in the crowd. He would never have expected that the first day he came to court with imperial advisor and met Emperor Li would betroth Princess Li Xiao to him. This was ridiculous. He let Yi Futian marry Li Xiao and become the emperor's son-in-law. Not to mention whether he was willing to marry or not, the reason he came to Emperor Li's realm was. And if he married Li Xiao? Numerous pairs of eyes fell upon the imperial advisor. The imperial advisor took one step forward and bowed to Emperor Li, saying, "It is the seventh swordsman's honor to obtain your majesty's grace. I took the seventh swordsman as my disciple, and I am aware that although he has an exceptional talent, his personality was unruly and disdainful. I am afraid he may bring offense to Princess. How about we ask about his thoughts? Otherwise, if Princess has discontent in the future, it will totally be my guilt." The imperial advisor's words make sense, Emperor Li said, nodding. He turned to Yi Futian and said, "The seventh swordsman, are you willing to marry?" Yi Futian lowered his head and stepped forward. He had no choice. Who dared to refuse the marriage Emperor Li arranged for him? It was Emperor Li's blessing, and he was supposed to bow and express gratitude for it. Any inappropriate reply might bring trouble. But of course, according to what Yi Futian knew, even if he declines it, Emperor Li would not be angry at him as the imperial advisor's disciple. "Your Majesty, I deeply appreciate your blessing. I have met Princess once, her beauty and wit are indeed unparalleled, and I am afraid I don't deserve someone like her. Besides, I am already emotionally attached to someone in the imperial advisor's residence. I don't dare to disgrace Her Highness," Yi Futian slowly said. One that didn't know the truth would assume he was sincerely afraid he didn't deserve Princess. However, many royal clan members had participated in the recent hunt and still remembered how he bluntly treated Princess and asked her if she could bear his sword. And now he claimed that her beauty and wit were unparalleled, and he didn't deserve her. Wow! Life was nothing but a play. But even though they all knew it, no one dared to expose it. Otherwise, the imperial advisor would be offended. Also, everyone had to rethink the intention behind the emperor's betrothal. Who dared to spread rumors in such a situation might pay for their senselessness at the price of death. Obviously, Emperor Li did so because he thought highly of the imperial advisor. Besides, who was the someone in the imperial advisor's residence he was emotionally attached to? It was evident to everyone he referred to the imperial advisor's daughter. The seventh swordsman had only been in the imperial advisor's residence for a few days, and now he wanted to become the imperial advisor's son-in-law. However, what else could Yi Futian say? He was sorry for Fei Shui, but at least, Emperor Li couldn't say anything about this reason. Both the imperial advisor and Yan Yuan took a look at him after he finished speaking. They knew he used Fei Shui as an excuse. Emperor Li took a glance at Yi Futian and said with a careless smile, "Okay. Imperial advisor, if in the future these two young people have this thought, I can arrange marriage for them." The matter of Li Xiao had come to an end. Emperor Li valued the imperial advisor, and since the seventh swordsman was emotionally attached to imperial advisor's daughter, he would not step in and bring embarrassment to the imperial advisor. And instead, he promised to arrange the marriage for them, which showed his magnanimity. Others would just let it be since Emperor Li himself no longer mentioned it. Everyone knew how politically stupid it was to give pressure to the imperial advisor's residence by such a thing. Nobody would do it. I am so thankful for your kindness, Your Majesty. I never ask about affairs between young people, but if one day the thing is decided, I will report to Your Majesty, said the imperial advisor, bowing. He knew what Yi Futian said was untrue, but he had to admit it had effectively solved the crisis since Yi Futian didn't want to say yes. Good, Emperor Li said, nodding. He then turned to others and asked, is there anything to report today? Your Majesty, I have one issue to report, said King Tiandao, who stood in the front line. What is your matter, my brother King? Asked Emperor Li. King Tiandao was Emperor Li's full brother and was conferred the title of King Tiandao, so Emperor Li called him Brother King. The way he addressed him indicated how intimate they were. It seemed that the Emperor Li equally respected imperial advisor and King Tiandao. The martial power of Dali dynasty has reached an unprecedented level. Numerous top figures came out of imperial advisors Dali National Academy and my Daily Mountain, and the number of upper plain cultivators in Dali keeps increasing. If the imperial advisor can provide help to the army and we build a Saint Plain iron troop together, it must be invincible, King Tiandao said in a solemn voice. Therefore, I earnestly request Your Majesty to allow the imperial advisor to enter the army and build an iron troop for the prosperity of Dali dynasty. The imperial advisor has put much effort and work in teaching cultivators for years in Emperor Li's city. I often send people to learn matrix methods from the imperial advisor and use the knowledge to train the army. Brother King, you are too straightforward, you want the imperial advisor to join the army, said Emperor Li, laughing. King Tiandao said, Your Majesty, these years, the imperial advisor has put much effort into his job, and his contribution to the dynasty has been significant. However, nowadays, everything in the imperial city runs smoothly, and the status of Dali Academy is unshakable. I heard that now the imperial advisor seldom takes up matters of Dali Academy. Since the third prince has made a breakthrough in the unblemished Saint Plain, I suggest the third princess take charge of Dali Academy for the imperial advisor and handle issues in the city. Prince Regent and King White can also maintain the city's stability. The imperial advisor and his disciples all have military ability and wisdom. If they can enter the army and cooperate with me, we can build an unparalleled troop, continued King Tiandao. Suddenly everyone's expression turned serious. All the top figures of the Dali imperial city gathered in front of the staircase, but no one let out a sound. King Tiandao wanted to enlist the imperial advisor and his disciples in the army and let the third prince be in charge of Dali National Academy. Didn't it mean asking imperial advisor to hand over the enterprise he had been devoting many years to? However, everything in Dali dynasty was supposed to belong to the royal clan. How could the imperial advisor say no if the third prince came to take charge? I can get your point, brother. If the imperial advisor and King Tiandao cooperate, indeed, an unassailable army can be established on the land of Dali, said Emperor Li, smiling. He turned to ask the imperial advisor, what do you think of King Tiandao's opinion? The imperial advisor made a fist salute and said, nowadays, Dali National Academy is indeed running in good condition, and I am not engaged with the job. Yan Yuan is in charge of running it. If Your Majesty would like to appoint the prince and others to the board of the academy, I can relax more and will be delighted to do so. As for entering the army, I am studying the new matrix method, and if there is an outcome, I will send it to the palace and then to the army, the imperial advisor continued, but directing the army is not my field. I am afraid I will disagree with King Tiandao if we work together. Is there anything in the world the imperial advisor is not good at? King Tiandao said after listening to the imperial advisor. And, imperial advisor, you don't need to worry about disagreement. As long as you are willing to join the army and build it well with me, I don't mind serving as the imperial advisor's assistant. Your Highness is so dedicated to strengthen the army, are you preparing for the war? The imperial advisor questioned him. Dali dynasty is powerful enough to start a war. Why can't we do it? Replied King Tiandao. A war between realms will cost too much, and once it explodes, the number of casualties will be uncontrollable even if the scale is not large. Dali is far from ready for it, said the imperial advisor. Exactly. That is why we need the imperial advisor's support, said King Tiandao. Emperor Li didn't speak, so the argument was only between the imperial advisor and King Tiandao. Prince Regent just stood there quietly and didn't say a word. It was as if all that had happened was none of his business. Please stop arguing, both of you, Emperor Li said, laughing. Imperial advisor is right. Wars are costly. Once the war begins, the situation will be out of our control. This issue requires further thought and discussion. How about King Tiandao and Imperial Advisor talk after the meeting? Yes, Your Majesty, King Tiao and Imperial Advisor said, nodding and ending the quarrel. Does anyone else have anything to report? Emperor Li asked and turned to others. Some reported some unimportant issues. However, Yi Futian was still slightly agitated. Did King Tiandao try to provoke a war? Was he aiming at Emperor Xiao's realm? At the thought of this, he delivered the message to the condor and let him pass it on to Xia Qingyuan. But soon, the condor's message for help came to Yi Futian's mind, which made Yi Futian feel curious. After taking a look at what had happened on that side, he said to himself that this guy deserved it. Didn't he know it was suicidal to irritate Xia Qingyuan by the things that happened today in the court? One could imagine how Xia Qingyuan's mood was like when she found out Yi Futian almost became Emperor Li's son-in-law. He came to Emperor Li's realm for revenge, and now he would become one of them. Yi Futian perceived how violent the scene where Xia Qingyuan and the Cyan Argusianus beat the condor was, and paid a silent tribute for him in advance. This was what his loose lips deserved. Yi Futian could hear black-winged condor's dreadful shrinking even from the infinitely far distance. This time, Xia Qingyuan, that woman, really had no mercy. In Dali Palace, after Emperor Li announced the end of the court meeting, the crowd dispersed. Li Yao took a look at Yi Futian and felt pity for him. If Yi Futian had agreed to become the son-in-law, his power in Dali would have definitely reached its apex. However, he declined the chance. He was, as usual, very special. Li Yao didn't come to talk to Yi Futian, but rather, he walked to King White and King Tiandao. Not long ago, he received a message, and now he needed King White and King Tiandao's backup, otherwise, the manpower he was able to manage would be not enough. Emperor Li convened King Tiandao, Prince Regent, King White for a meeting, and the rest of the crowd gradually dispersed. Emperor Li convened King Tiandao, Prince Regent, King White for a meeting, and the rest of the crowd gradually dispersed. Li Yao walked to Yan Yuan and Yi Futian's side and said, laughing, the seventh swordsman, just now if you had said yes, from now on you would have to call me brother-in-law. I hope your highness didn't mind, said Yi Futian. Li Yao shook his head and said, of course not, since you are emotionally attached to master's daughter. My sister Li Xiao is very unruly. If you had nodded, she would still cause a disturbance. The seventh swordsman was such a proud person, and the first time he met with Li Xiao, the two had already had an intense confrontation. If Li Xiao married Jian Qi, the scene must be quite horrifying. Li Yao guessed they could fight every day. Yi Futian didn't say much. Yan Yuan, who was standing aside, cut in, it takes a while for His Majesty and the Imperial Advisor to discuss issues. The seventh swordsman and I should return now, Your Highness. I will see you out, elder brother, said Li Yao. Please stay, Your Highness, said Yan Yuan respectfully. And then they returned. Li Yao watched Yi Futian leave and had a thought in his mind. In the Battle of Empty Realm, Yi Futian of Emperor Xia's realm was peerless, and no one on the battlefield dared to fight him. Today the seventh sword was also unrivaled in Emperor Li's realm. If both appeared on the battlefield, who would defeat the other? The message he received recently was just about Yi Futian. If Li Yao had known the two people that he was comparing were the same person, nobody could understand how he would feel. Of course, they looked like two utterly different people. Yi Futian was good at using halberds, and the seventh sword was good at using swords. Li Yao had made close contact with Yi Futian several times, and he felt their life forces were completely different. Li Yao was smart, but he did not think they were the same person. The thought had never even occurred to him. Anyway, who would suddenly think two completely different people were one for no reason? It was said that after Yi Futian and others left the imperial palace, Li Xiao was furious in her palace, and claimed she would kill the seventh swordsman, who had embarrassed her so much. How could he reject the emperor's betrothal in public? Did he think she didn't deserve him? She heard that the imperial advisor's daughter had a severe illness, could not see, and had to sleep all the time. And his heart belonged to her. Was a princess not better than a half-dead patient? Wasn't it an embarrassment? Even though the patient was the imperial advisor's daughter, it was an open secret. Nobody dared to mention it during the court meeting, but they all knew. The people in princess's residence lived their lives in apprehension, but most people in the palace enjoyed it as a farce. After Li Xiao was mollified, she would soon forget about it, but if the seventh swordsman had promised to marry her, she probably would still make a fuss. Yi Futian wasn't even aware of all this, he didn't care what Li Xiao thought. In Emperor Xiao's realm, Black-Winged Condor was being beaten like hell. While in the villa where the cottage was located, on the back side of the mountain, the sword saint stood on the edge of a cliff in silence, his black clothes blowing in the wind. Behind him, a person came and asked, "What are you thinking about, brother?" The person was the cottage villa third disciple Gu Donglu. "It has been 19 years, Sword Saint said abruptly. However, Gu Donglu understood what he meant. He walked to Sword Saint's side and nodded. "Yes, 19 years. In year 10004 of the Divine Prefecture calendar, the peerless Princess Donghuang came to the Book Mountain of Eastern Barren Territory and took away Sir Du of the cottage villa. Today was year 10023 of the Divine Prefecture calendar. It had been 19 years. Others might not understand what Sword Saint meant, but Gu Donglu understood it. Too many things had happened over these 19 years. They had reached the height they'd never dreamt of before. They had experienced numerous trials. So many times, they had been on the edge of death, until they came to be who they were today. Even so, it seemed they still had a long way to go. The Sword Saint looked up at the sky dome and asked, "Donglu, how high do you think the sky is?" When people in the lower worlds looked up, what they saw was the sky, and people of the upper worlds looked up, the sky was still there. How high was the sky? "Infinitely high," said Gu Donglu. "How far can we go?" asked Sword Saint again. "Infinitely far as our hearts," said Gu Donglu. Sword Saint nodded, smiling. The sky was infinitely high, as the hearts, as the paths. Once upon a time, people called him a genius and said his state of mind was exceptional, that he could witness history. He didn't care if he could witness history or not. What he cared about was nothing but when he could see Master and achieve his wish with him. However, all seemed too far away. The more he thought, the more intangible everything seemed. "Donglu, I am going to enter the Saint Plane," said Sword Saint. Gu Donglu paused a second and grinned, saying, "That's great." The brother had finally made a breakthrough on that level. Since he said he would enter the Saint Plane, he would make it. Gu Donglu had no doubt, whether or not the brother was a saint. Sword Saint laughed. He reached out one hand. All of a sudden, demonic might pervaded the space, and in the roaring waves of demonic might, a demon's sword gradually formed. All the might converged in his body, which made him bawl to the sky and earth. "Even though it is infinitely far, I will chase after it." Sword Saint took a stride forward and lifted the demon's sword into the air. Stronger demonic might kept rolling, growling, and merging into the sword. The demon's sword greedily swallowed the terrifying radiance, an aura of force surrounded the whole villa. People in the villa looked up in the sky. Yaya, Lapis Saint, and the village chief all looked at Sword Saint, who was soaring up in the mid-air as if he was attempting to touch the bound of the sky. "Brother." Zhuge Mingyue, Luo Fan, Yishaoshi, and Beitang Xing'er also caught sight of Sword Saint and looked toward the sky. As Sword Saint rose higher, the demonic might also grew stronger. The light of catastrophe flickered above the upper sky. The storm and clouds turned dark as if the end of the world would come. The sky transformed. His catastrophe. People in the villa were in shock. Brother is entering his Saint Plane catastrophe. Zhuge Mingyue tucked her hair behind her ears using one slender hand. Her eyes were crystal clear and gorgeous when she looked toward the empty sky. A saint. A cottage villa disciple would become a figure of the Saint Plane. From now on, the older brother would become a sword saint in the true sense of the word. If Master had been able to see the day to come, he must have been very happy. Besides, the older brother, Donglu, and Yi Futian were also in the last stage of Sage Plane, and one day, they would experience this, too. Especially Yi Futian. He had caught up with everyone in cultivation. Maybe he would meet the master's expectation one day. Today is such a good day, sister, Beitang Xing'er walked to Zhuge Mingyue and said. On the first day of year 10023, according to divine prefecture calendar, the older brother entered Saint Plane. Yi Futian would also be happy for his older brother if he had been here. Black clouds loomed in the upper sky as if the demon catastrophe was about to come. Everyone's catastrophe differed depending on their cultivation styles. The intensity of Sword Saint's catastrophe was much higher than the catastrophe of Dozhan. The force seemed to be able to crush Sword Saint. But no cottage disciples doubted whether or not Sword Saint could pass this catastrophe. Just as what Master had said during the cottage cultivation, although the older brother's talent was ordinary among all brothers and sisters, he continued to make steady progress. Since he was experiencing the Saint Plane catastrophe, he had completed all the required conditions. It was an automatic outcome. Even though the Saint Plane catastrophe might be a tough one, all disciples believed the older brother would overcome it. The Sword Saint continued soaring up in the sky as if he was attempting to run into the catastrophe of law. The sword was held tight in his hand, the boundless reflection of catastrophe light dripped down from the sky. Followed by an appalling thunder, the catastrophe befell him. Sword Saint raised his sword and heaved a heavy strike toward the catastrophe. The catastrophe was chopped up. Even the sky dome seemed to be torn apart. The scene was like a thump on everyone's heart. Soon, the catastrophe converged again. Sword Saint put down his hand and the sword faded away. The light of catastrophe fell upon him and washed across his torso. The catastrophe of the law was dangerous, but it was a necessary path to becoming a saint. One could only become a saint by accepting the purification of the law. That strike was not aimed at destroying the catastrophe. It was a manifestation of Sword Saint's fearless heart. Even though heaven was infinitely high, the path was infinitely far, he must rise up in person and see them with his own eyes. Under the dome of the boundless catastrophe, Sword Saint stood straight up in the air like a god. Even people far from the villa looked up and watched toward the direction, full of awe. In the imperial advisor's residence, Emperor Li's realm, at dusk Yi Futian heard from the condor that the older brother had entered the Saint Plane. He woke up from the status of cultivation, and a grin spread across his face. He stood up on his feet, eyes fixed on the sky. Finally, a cottage disciple set foot on the saint path. The only pity was that Yi Futian was not in the cottage to witness this historical moment. Now the older brother had entered the Saint Plane. One day, Yi Futian would, too. So would the third brother. They would all reach a higher place. What makes you so happy? Someone said in a soft voice. Yi Futian turned around and saw Fei Shui, who was facing him. She said, I can sense how excited you are from a far distance. A happy thing, of course, Yi Futian said, laughing. Really? I heard in today's court meeting His Majesty wanted to betroth Princess to you. If you were happy about this, you shouldn't have rejected it, Fei Shui said with a smile. And when did you fall in love with me? Yi Futian was very embarrassed. Fei Shui smiled carelessly. She was able to sense emotions, so she knew Yi Futian was never in love with her. Otherwise, he could not hide it in front of her. Why did you decline the emperor's betrothal? Don't tell me you really have someone you love. Fei Shui said, grinning. She suddenly wanted to know about Yi Futian's thoughts. It must be interesting. Yi Futian heard Fei Shui's questions, and it felt like an icy needle was pricking his heart. Even after so many years had passed, he was still heartbroken whenever it came to his mind. Fei Shue's smile vanished. She immediately realized her curiosity was not appropriate. She lowered her head and softly said, "I'm sorry." She knew she asked a bad question. "Never mind, it's not about you," Yi Futian said. He knew Fei Shui didn't mean to. "I should go now. Please forget it and continue thinking about that happy things," Fei Shui said quietly and turned and left, worrying she would affect Yi Futian's mood. Seeing her leave, Yi Futian shook his head with a bitter smile. How could he easily forget it since it had already come into his mind? But the news that Sword Saint had entered the Saint Plains still made him happy from the bottom of his heart. After Fei Shui left, Yi Futian looked up to the sky. The scene of the palace battle remained vivid in his mind. Jieyu's death was the pain in his heart. They had been together since they were 16 years old, they had gone through ups and downs for so many years, but all became nothing but a memory because of Li Yao. Even though Li Yao was friendly with him in Emperor Li's realm, Yi Futian knew it was only because of his current identity as the seventh swordsman, a person useful to Li Yao, instead of the trivial and miserable palace lord at the mercy of him in the land of the 9 states. So he ventured to Emperor Li's realm. However, Yi Futian gradually realized his plan was not as perfect as he first thought. He came to the imperial advisor but discovered that this mysterious and powerful figure in legend was uncommon and common at the same time. He dithered. Especially when he cultivated in the deed of thorough comprehension, he found the cultivation method was above the saint level. But the imperial advisor had taught it to him before Yi Futian helped Fei Shui. Besides, from Fei Shui and Lu Chuan's conscious or unconscious indications, Yi Futian came to know that people of the imperial advisor's residence were not unaware of his suspicious identity as the seventh swordsman. However, even so, the imperial advisor was eager to teach him the cultivation method beyond saint level. What kind of magnanimity was it? If Yi Futian had been in the imperial advisor's shoes, he would not have done it. Was it only because the imperial advisor appreciated his passion for cultivation? Yi Futian couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if he killed Li Yao as the imperial advisor's disciple. Even though the imperial advisor was in power in Dali dynasty, and Emperor Li might not harm him, the estrangement must grow between them. And as what he had seen in today's court meeting, King Tiandao was also very aggressive and was urging the imperial advisor to join the army. Prince Regent's forbearance was unsettling, too. His offspring was killed, but when Yan Yuan took him away in the face of the Prince Regent didn't demand the release. Yan Yuan also said the Prince Regent was very sophisticated. He had his own intention behind the seeming forbearance. What's more, the imperial advisor was against battles between realms. Some people speculated that he could transform saints, and King Tiandao obviously also had this thought, but the imperial advisor didn't do it. Did Emperor Li have the thought, too? King Tiandao was Emperor Li's full brother. If Emperor Li had no opinion on what King Tiandao had said, why should he convene imperial advisor, King Tiandao, and others for a session after the court meeting? The harmony between the lord and the ministers in Dali dynasty was nothing but an illusion. The imperial advisor was perhaps not at the apex of power in Dali as he appeared to be. Was the imperial advisor's status really that stable? Maybe yes, only if no accident occurred. Yi Futian was having an inner struggle. If the Dali imperial advisor had been a different person, Yi Futian would fool the imperial advisor and Emperor Li against each other without hesitation, just like before. But he had changed his state of mind after this period of time. The imperial advisor once passed the message through Fei Shui to tell him not to waver and do what his heart felt was right. Sir Du also taught him to live a life between sky and earth, following his conscience. Killing Li Yao was what he pursued, but if he made it, would he be free from guilt? He was not supposed to involve others in his plan for revenge. If he had not known the result, he would not have had so much concern. However, he knew what outcome that would bring. Following my conscience, between the sky and earth, Yi Futian murmured and exhaled deeply. Suddenly, his mind cleared. In just one moment, he felt his heart open, and his mind become broad. It was as if his body was connected to the sky and earth, and everything in the world became clearer to him. It was a wonderful feeling that he couldn't tell what it is. It seems that I have touched the saint path, Yi Futian thought to himself. Everything became so bright in his eyes. At the moment, he was getting closer to the saint plane. Yi Futian sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Instantly, his mind connected to Black-Winged Condor in the palace of Emperor Xia's realm. In Princess Residence, Emperor Xia's realm, the poor Black-Winged Condor had so many bruises. The next time he came in front of Xia Qingyuan, she gave him a cold, brief glance and called, "Siani, what's the matter?" "It's me." It was Yi Futian's voice. Xia Qingyuan paused a second, but she was still emotionless and replied coldly, "I heard you will become Emperor Li's son-in-law." She was still thinking about whether Yi Futian should belong to Emperor Xia's realm or Emperor Li's realm. If he had said yes in the court meeting, he would immediately become the imperial advisors or emperor. Li's son-in-law and his status would be equal to that of a noble Dali prince. However, strictly speaking, Yi Futian in Emperor Xia's realm was just a princess's servant. The contrast was. "May I know why your highness is not in a good mood?" Yi Futian asked calmly. "When am I not in a good mood?" Xia Qingyuan asked coldly, expressionless. She would not admit it. "Why did you beat the condor half to death then?" Yi Futian was speechless. This woman lied through her teeth. The beast couldn't keep its mouth shut. "Why can't I discipline it?" replied Xia Qingyuan. Yi Futian thought to himself that this woman was indeed unreasonable, even though she was the high-born princess of Emperor Xia's realm. "I will come back," said Yi Futian. Xia Qingyuan paused a second and stared at Black-Winged Condor, asking, "When?" "I will find the right time to tell them I will travel outside Emperor Li's realm for cultivation, and then I will come back to Emperor Xia's realm," said Yi Futian. He hoped the seventh swordsman could vanish. Nobody would know his identity. Vengeance for Jiuyue had to be delayed. Okay. Xia Qingyuan was finally relieved. Even though Yi Futian had converted his identity, he was surrounded by top figures in Dali Imperial City, and he even had met Emperor Li. She felt it was not that safe for him to continue. What's more, she was not sure whether the assassination last time was a trap someone set up for Yi Futian, but if it was, the message might have reached Emperor Li's realm. Even though the identity of Yi Futian in Dali dynasty was the seventh swordsman, and people might not realize it. But still, there was a risk. Now since Yi Futian was willing to come back, she fully supported it. "Do you need anyone to pick you up?" asked Xia Qingyuan. "No, that will alert them. I will use cultivation as an excuse to leave and change my identity, then come back," said Yi Futian. Xia Qingyuan nodded and said, "Okay, just be careful." "Thank you for your care, Your Highness," said Yi Futian. Xia Qingyuan paused a second and said coldly, "I just don't want to see you die in Dali." Yi Futian didn't say anything. Xia Qingyuan continued, "Are you going to come from the upper worlds or lower worlds?" "From the lower worlds," said Yi Futian. It was safer. "Good. You control demonic beasts in the Holy Ji Palace of Lower Worlds, don't you?" "I will send people to the Lower World Palace and take the controlled demonic beast to the border of Emperor Li's realm just in case," Xia Qingyuan continued. The Black-Winged Condor would stay in the palace, so she could know the latest situation and communicate with Yi Futian. "Your Highness doesn't need to bother," said Yi Futian. "It's settled. Send a message to me whenever you can after you depart," said Xia Qingyuan coldly. Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan. There was a strange look in his eyes. Okay. He didn't say much, and soon he exited from Black-Winged Condor's mind. In Dali dynasty, Yi Futian had cultivated for some days. He was not able to leave on the first day of the year when Emperor Li's betrothal happened, so he waited and spent the time focusing on cultivating the knowledge in the deed of thorough comprehension. Sometimes, he also sought advice from the imperial advisor, and the imperial advisor explained to him patiently every time. As his cultivation progressed, Yi Futian gradually felt his level was getting closer to the Saint Plane. He was very likely to enter the Saint Plane this year. The feeling was very mysterious and indescribable. One day, Yi Futian came to the courtyard where the imperial advisor lived. "Master," Yi Futian greeted the imperial advisor, who was resting there. The imperial advisor looked at him and asked, "Do you have any questions about cultivation?" "No." Yi Futian shook his head and said, "Master, I feel my cultivation has reached the edge of Saint Plane, so I am thinking about traveling around the world and taking occasions to set foot on the Saint Path." "Good. You need company?" asked the imperial advisor. "No need, Master. I want to focus on meditating cultivation paths this time. I will travel the world alone with only one sword in my hand and will not come back until I enter the Saint Plane," Yi Futian said to the imperial advisor, but he knew it was not true. From now on, the name of the seventh swordsman would no longer exist in Dali. Yi Futian looked at the imperial advisor and had mixed feelings. He didn't want to say goodbye to him. If Dali had not been his enemy, Yi Futian would have stayed and cultivated under the instruction of the imperial advisor for a long time. He was indeed a highly respectable old man. "Where are you going?" Fei Shui came toward Yi Futian and asked. Yi Futian lied. "Anywhere, upper or lower worlds. I want to travel around," said Yi Futian. He knew he could not conceal anything from her, but he still said it in this way. He was planning to go to King Li's palace and ask Li Yu to open the matrix for him, and then he would enter the lower worlds. Li Yu was his friend. She could do him a favor. Fei Shui didn't say anything. She could sense that it was very likely Yi Futian would not come back after leaving. She knew Yi Futian had his secret, but why would he not come back? What kind of secret made him do this? Was there someplace outside the imperial palace that was better than the imperial advisor's residence in Dali dynasty? "Do you have to go?" Fei Shui asked after a short silence. "Yes," Yi Futian nodded, serious. Fei Shui fell silent for a moment again and then put on a smile, saying, "I hope you enter Saint Plane one day, seventh swordsman." She came in front of him and slightly opened her arms. She had no idea when the next time she would see his face. Yi Futian knew what she meant. He opened his arms and hugged her and said, laughing, "Now I have to say I was honest to His Majesty." Fei Shui sighed to herself. The guy made a joke again. The hug was, of course, not about love, it was to say goodbye. The imperial advisor looked at them as if he had understood something, but he didn't ask. He just said with a laugh, "The path has no boundaries, cultivation exists everywhere. I hope you enter Saint Plane soon." The path has no boundaries, cultivation exists everywhere. Yi Futian looked at the imperial advisor and said, "Master, please take care." And then he took a bow to the imperial advisor and turned around, leaving. Before he left, he said, "Please say goodbye to my brothers for me, sir." Yi Futian was walking out of imperial advisor's residence. Fei Shui couldn't see, but she still faced Yi Futian and had a bright smile on her face. Yi Futian was walking out of imperial advisor's residence. Fei Shui couldn't see, but she still faced Yi Futian and had a bright smile on her face. Everything had gone well so far. Yi Futian was going out, and at the same time, a group of people was coming in the direction of imperial advisor's residence, and the person who led the group was Li Yao. Li Yao saw Yi Futian and paused, greeting, "Seventh swordsman." "Your Highness," Yi Futian stopped and saluted, too. "Where are you going?" asked Li Yao. "My cultivation has reached a plateau, so I am thinking about traveling outside and strengthening my swordsmanship. I hope one day I can enter Saint Plane," Yi Futian replied. Li Yao nodded and said, smiling, "By the time you come back, a peerless swordsman in training will rise in our Dali dynasty." Yi Futian didn't respond. He said, "Your Highness, I should go now." "All right." Li Yao nodded and said, I have some matters to talk about with Master. Sorry I can't see you out. Yi Futian and Li Yao parted and walked in opposite directions, respectively. Li Yao headed toward the imperial advisor's residence, and Yi Futian went in the direction of King Li's residence. Outside the imperial advisor's residence, Li Yao and others landed and requested to see him. Soon they were invited in. Li Yao bowed in front of the imperial advisor and saluted, Master. Your Highness, the imperial advisor nodded and greeted him while sitting. Will the seventh swordsman enter the Saint Plains soon? Asked Li Yao, smiling. Yes, he will, said the imperial advisor, nodding. The seventh swordsman's talent is extremely rare even throughout the 100 years of Dali dynasty history. I can't imagine how great he will be after he enters Saint Plain, said Li Yao, laughing. The imperial advisor slightly nodded and asked, Is there anything I can do for you today, Your Highness? Yes. Li Yao became serious after hearing what the imperial advisor asked. He said, I received a message before that the person who killed Brother Yuan Jin on the battlefield of Empty Realm might have reached Emperor Li's realm. It is undoubtedly extremely hard to find a person in a country, however, recently, I got one more message that this person will probably return from the lower worlds. I am here to ask Master if my brothers can go to the lower worlds with me. The imperial advisor took a look at Li Yao and said, People die during war. It was Yuan Jin's destiny to end his life on the battlefield. Please don't take it too much to heart, Your Highness. Li Yao nodded, but he couldn't put it aside. Yi Futian left a too strong impression on him. That year in the 9 states, Li Yao treated his enemies like nothing, but on the battlefield of Empty Realm, a man, who he thought he could trample on like an ant, completely defeated him and even threatened his life. Yuan Jin had entered the Saint Plain and was one of the most talented among all brothers, but he was also defeated and killed. If Yi Futian became stronger, he would definitely become a great threat. But as an opponent, Li Yao must admit that Yi Futian was a very rare genius, just like the seventh swordsman. With these thoughts in mind, Li Yao bowed to imperial advisor and requested to leave. He turned around and prepared to leave. After walking a short distance, he was suddenly hit with a thought like a lightning strike jolting his mind. It stunned him for a few seconds. He froze for quite a while. His face turned pale, and his heart thumped faster and faster. No, that's not possible. Li Yao's heart twisted painfully. He tried to deny the thought that came out of nowhere, but he couldn't erase it from his mind. Yi Futian and the seventh swordsman. Both of them were rarely seen geniuses. Both of them were able to defend saint-level attacks. It was said that something detained Yi Futian since he came to Dali. The seventh sword from the lower worlds rapidly gained fame as a swordsman in Dali dynasty. He got the message that Yi Futian was about to leave, and at this time, the seventh sword was going outside to cultivate. Why did he have to choose this time to go outside? Li Yao had never put these two people together, and he didn't have the idea even when the seventh swordsman said he would travel outside to cultivate, but after he had the conversation with the imperial advisor, the connection between Yi Futian and the seventh swordsman suddenly came to his mind. His heart trembled heavily. Master, where is the seventh swordsman heading? Li Yao turned around and asked. Even at this moment, he was still not sure and needed to confirm it with the imperial advisor. I don't know. He said anywhere, said the imperial advisor. I want to take the seventh swordsman to the army for cultivation. Please allow me to do this, Master, Li Yao bowed and said. Fei Shui seemed to have perceived something, and her face turned ashen. She looked toward her father. The imperial advisor said, Your Highness, cultivation should follow the will of the heart. Since the seventh swordsman wants to cultivate outside, let him do it. Li Yao looked at imperial advisor and bowed, saying, Yes, Master. He left the imperial advisor's residence with his head lowered. He was still not sure about it, so he didn't say it out loud. What if he was wrong? But if he was right, the seventh swordsman would definitely go to the lower worlds. The best way to enter the lower worlds in Dali Imperial City was to go to King Li's palace. Let's go. Li Yao quickly headed in the direction of King Li's palace with his people. Father, I can sense that His Highness has a desire to kill, said Fei Shui to her father. Her face was pale. The imperial advisor looked into the distance and let out a sigh. Now it made sense. Finally, he understood why the seventh swordsman had to leave. If he hadn't left, Li Yao wouldn't have noticed. If he hadn't left, what kind of ending would be waiting for him? What would happen if the seventh swordsman kept cultivating in Dali, depending on his talent and nature? Wang Zhong also cultivated with imperial advisor before the seventh swordsman arrived, but Wang Zhong hated him. Persistence was his nature. But compared with insisting on something, what was more difficult to do was letting go. The seventh swordsman chose the latter. The imperial advisor had not expected that he could learn so much from a young disciple at the apex of his Saint Plane. The law had no boundaries, and according to the nature the seventh sword had shown, the imperial advisor believed he could have his achievement. With this in mind, the imperial advisor released his soul of Saint Apex and sent it into the distance. It reached Dali National Academy. Yan Yuan was in the academy and perceived it. He raised his head and saluted, Master. Yan Yuan, imperial advisor's voice came to Yan Yuan's mind, please see your brother, the seventh swordsman, off in King Li's palace. Where to? Asked Yan Yuan. To the 9 states, Emperor Xia's realm, said imperial advisor's voice. Yan Yuan fixed his eyes on the empty sky. He stood still and didn't say anything for a while. Why? Yan Yuan hesitated for a moment and asked. He rarely asked Master for an explanation, but this time, he did. He is your younger brother, the seventh swordsman, in Emperor Li's realm, but when he passes the border of Emperor Li's realm, the seventh swordsman will no longer exist in Dali. Imperial advisor's voice again came into Yan Yuan's mind. Yan Yuan closed his eyes and ruminated for a second. The next moment, he opened his beaming eyes, something seemed to be clear in his mind. He said, I see. Yan Yuan did a flip and vanished from Dali National Academy. King Li's palace, imperial advisor's residence, and Dali National Academy were all located on Emperor Li's avenue, so the actual distance was not very far. Yi Futian didn't take a long time to come to King Li's palace. Li Yang and Li Yu were surprised to see Yi Futian come, so they asked, Seventh Swordsman, what brings you here today? I want to go to the lower worlds to travel around and find ways to enter the Saint Path. Your Highnesses, please allow me to use the matrix and enter the lower worlds, said Yi Futian. He came to the upper worlds by the matrix in King Li's palace last time after he gained fame in the King Li's palace. King Li ruled the lower worlds, and the matrix he was in charge of connected the upper and lower worlds. All right. Li Yang and Li Yu immediately approved it. They had no reason to refuse Yi Futian's request. They were friendly with Yi Futian from the beginning. Besides, an imperial advisor's disciple's request to use the matrix was always granted. Do you want to depart now? Asked Li Yu. Yes. Yi Futian nodded. I will go with you, Li Yu said, smiling. I want to go to lower worlds to see my father anyway. Then they together headed in the direction of the matrix in King Li's residence. At the moment, Yi Futian heard the sound of someone breaking into the air behind him. He seemed to have perceived what happened and frowned. Seventh Swordsman, please wait. It was Li Yao's voice. Yi Futian didn't know Li Yao had become suspicious. Li Yang, Li Yu, and Yi Futian, who were near the matrix, turned around and looked at him. What can I do for you, Your Highness? Asked Yi Futian. I have an important issue, and I need you to come with me to the Imperial Palace and solve my confusion, said Li Yao. Even though he was suspicious, Li Yao didn't immediately accuse him. He had to confirm everything before he adopted a hostile attitude. Because the Imperial Advisor still stood behind the seventh swordsman, he was the Imperial Advisor's acknowledged disciple. If the Imperial Advisor developed a grudge with him because of this, there was no benefit to Li Yao. There was a strange look on Yi Futian's face, but it soon turned back to normal. He said, Your Highness can speak here. I will try my best to help clear up any confusion Your Highness may have. This matter is extremely important, so I can only tell you in the Imperial Palace. It won't take very long. Please spare some time to go with me for a few hours, and you can cultivate later, continued Li Yao. Although he was still very polite, Yi Futian had already sensed something abnormal. Li Yao's tone and attitude seemed somewhat strange. Since Yi Futian transformed into the seventh swordsman, he had been very cautious in behaving consistently with the seventh swordsman's personality. Everyone spoke and did things in their personal style, but Li Yao, at this moment, acted abnormally. So, had he become suspicious? It shouldn't have been possible since the seventh swordsman and Yi Futian were two completely different people now. Yi Futian didn't know the reason that Li Yao became suspicious because he was on his way to the lower worlds for cultivation. Not long ago, Li Yao received a message that Yi Futian was likely to return to Emperor Li's realm from the lower worlds. Your Highness, I have requested to leave and have gotten permission from Master. Please wait for me when I return, Yi Futian insisted. He had to go. Li Yao's heart sunk after hearing his reply. Li Yao's speculation was getting closer and closer to reality, which made his heart harden. So the person whom he treated with respect these days was the person he most wanted to kill? The atmosphere suddenly became cool, and at this moment, a person arrived from the sky. Yi Futian saw it was Yan Yuan. He said to himself that this time, he had been exposed. Suddenly his heart sank, too. Would Yan Yuan capture him? I need to do something in the lower worlds. Master told me to see you off. Yan Yuan came in front of Yi Futian and said to him. Yi Futian's heart slightly trembled. He looked toward Yan Yuan and didn't know how to feel. Yi Futian's heart slightly trembled. He looked toward Yan Yuan and didn't know how to feel. Just now, he thought that Yan Yuan had come to capture him. However, Yan Yuan said he came to see him off per the Imperial Advisor's request. Obviously, Li Yao remembered something in the Imperial Advisor's residence after Yi Futian left, which was he stopped Yi Futian. The Imperial Advisor had also figured it out. Thank you, brother. Yi Futian nodded and didn't decline Yan Yuan's support. At this moment, he was the seventh swordsman, he was not Yi Futian. Li Yao's face took on a strange expression. The Imperial Advisor asked Yan Yuan to see him off. What was his intention? Did it mean that the Imperial Advisor had found out what had happened, but he still let him go anyway? Li Yao was almost certain that Yi Futian and the seventh sword were the same person. Let's go, Yan Yuan came next to Yi Futian and said. They stood on the teleportation matrix and uttered, launch the matrix. Li Yang and Li Yu were perplexed. Why was the atmosphere so weird? The seventh swordsman wanted to go outside to cultivate, and it seemed that Li Yao didn't allow it, but the Imperial Advisor's chief disciple Yan Yuan came to see the seventh swordsman off. The matrix emitted dazzling light, the formidable will of the law erupted from it. I will see the seventh swordsman off, too, said Li Yao. He looked ghastly and walked straight to the matrix with his people. He had no time to hesitate at this moment. Before he entered the matrix, he passed a message to a subordinate, and the person didn't enter the matrix and went in a different direction instead. I will go with you, said Li Yu. Confused, she also stepped into the matrix. She wanted to figure out what had happened. A dazzling beam of light soared up, and in the extremely strong light, all the people vanished from where they were. They arrived at King Li's palace, the Dali dynasty of the lower worlds. Li Yao and Yi Futian stood together. There was a short distance between them. At the moment, they had their own thoughts and didn't look at each other. In King Li's palace, a lot of people came to them. Many wills were sent here. A voice sent greetings from a distance, Li Yao, Your Highness, Sir Yan Yuan, how do you do? What brought you to the lower worlds? A mighty figure stepped outside a palace and came in front of the matrix. The voice came from King Li. All his people bowed and saluted. We are here to meet Li Yao Highness, Sir Yan Yuan. King Li noticed Yi Futian and greeted him, too, smiling. Once the seventh swordsman gained fame in the lower worlds and entered the upper worlds with Lu Chuan and people of Sword Mountain. Now he had become the imperial advisor's direct disciple and was famous in Dali imperial city. King Li was, of course, happy to see him have such achievements. However, King Li soon realized the atmosphere was somewhat quite strange. Everyone was silent. Yan Yuan brother, you have come to the lower worlds with the seventh swordsman. Are you planning to keep escorting him? Asked Li Yao. He already knew the answer based on Yan Yuan and the seventh swordsman's attitudes. I want to escort him a little longer. Please return, Your Highness, Yan Yuan said, taking Yi Futian to stride down the matrix. What if I want him to stay? Li Yao said. The people behind him came forward immediately and blocked Yan Yuan and Yi Futian's way. Your Highness. King Li and Li Yu were stunned. What had happened? Weren't Li Yao and the seventh swordsman good friends? Besides, Li Yao was also the imperial advisor's nominal disciple, so he was supposed to respect Yan Yuan, but why were they almost hostile to each other? I apologize that I can't obey your rule, but my master's order is first, said Yan Yuan. He threw his sleeves and took a step, jumping into the air. Stop them. Li Yao ordered. People behind him all dashed forward toward Yan Yuan and Yi Futian. Uncle, please help me stop Sir Yan Yuan and the seventh swordsman, said Li Yao to King Li. King Li was confused and hesitated for a while. Catching the imperial advisor's disciples? He had to hesitate even though it was the prince who gave him the order. Uncle, the seventh swordsman is a spy from Emperor Xiao's realm. We must arrest him, said Li Yao. How had he treated the seventh swordsman since he entered Emperor Li's realm? Li Yao treated him as a confidant, gifted him the sword of Cassiopeia, and took care of him as much as he could. But now, he realized the seventh swordsman was actually Yi Futian, the foe he was most eager to kill. How did he feel? As if he was wrapped by Yi Futian around his finger. The imperial advisor was the pillar of the country, but he was also trying to help him. Okay, I see. King Li was shocked by what Li Yao just said. The seventh swordsman was a spy from Emperor Xiao's realm. It was from his palace that the seventh swordsman entered the upper worlds. Releasing abundant life force, King Li also immediately led his people to chase them. Sir Yan Yuan, please stop, King Li shouted, his voice resonating throughout the sky, but Yan Yuan's speed was faster, and no one was able to catch up with him. Please forgive me for this offense. King Li saw this and moved his fingers into a claw and swung in the air. Suddenly the might of law shrouded the place. A blurred image of a giant holy dragon showed up above the clouds, and it raised a terrifying sharp claw and smashed toward Yan Yuan and Yi Futian. Yan Yuan drew a circle using his left hand, and suddenly, numerous swords of the great laws floated up and scattered all over the space with his body as the center. Go! Yan Yuan threw down his sleeve and unleashed the swords, which all aimed at the dragon and stabbed through it. People on the ground looked up to the upper sky, shocked. Wasn't that person King Li? Who was fighting with him? When I am determined to leave, you will not be able to keep me. Please stop here, Your Highness, Yan Yuan said. A dazzling beam of light flared up from his body and shook the sky and earth. It was still expanding, speeding up, outpacing anyone else. Witnessing the scene from a distance, Li Yao's face was ghastly white. Yan Yuan was considered the strongest cultivator below the saint plane of Nirvana, and he did deserve the title. If there was no saint of the fourth holy plane Nirvana present, who would be able to stop him? Follow him. Li Yao let out a shout. King Li and others fixed Yan Yuan as the target of their wills and continued chasing after them. At the same time, in the Prince Regent's residence, Emperor Li's realm. The Prince Regent was usually not interested in such matters, but this time, he opened his eyes, and anger flared up in his eyes. He could understand that the imperial advisor was detached from worldly complications, which made him a real saint. It was his virtue, but this was also his flaw. How could he make a mistake like this? If he had been in the imperial advisor's position, he would have captured the seventh sword. The Prince Regent stood up like a giant dragon waking up from his slumber. Suddenly, his will engulfed his villa and spread even further. The next moment, he jumped into the air and disappeared from the Prince Regent's residence like a furious dragon having stormed into the ninth sky. Many people of the Prince Regent's residence looked up to the sky, full of excitement. The Prince Regent was finally ready to take charge. The life force was so powerful that even the people in extremely distant places were able to perceive it. Of course, the Dali dynasty imperial advisor was able to sense it in his residence. The imperial advisor looked up in the sky and told Fei Shui, "I will see him off." After saying so, he took a stride and vanished into the air. In the lower worlds, Yan Yuan took Yi Futian, and they kept going. They were swiftly crossing the empty realm. At the moment, Yi Futian kind of felt bad. He didn't expect Li Yao to figure out his identity before he left. He had already given up his plan. And he would accept it if the imperial advisor's residence had just ignored him, but now Yan Yuan was escorting him to leave in person and even had a conflict with Li Yao. Didn't it mean that Yi Futian had the involved imperial advisor's residence in his own issues? Yi Futian couldn't understand how Li Yao figured it out. Li Yao hadn't even perceived it when he met Yi Futian outside the imperial advisor's residence. Was it because he told Li Yao he would go outside to cultivate, which made Li Yao suspicious? He knew what happened in Emperor Xia's realm, and Li Yao might know Yi Futian was not in Emperor Xia's realm, but how could he know it was him? The only possible reason was that Li Yao knew he was going back. But since Xia Qingyuan promised to send people to meet him, these people should have been reliable and shouldn't have attracted anyone's attention. What went wrong? He looked at Yan Yuan next to him and asked, "Does Master know who I am?" Yan Yuan took a look at him and said, "You are the seventh swordsman, Master's direct disciple." Yi Futian's stare froze for a moment, and then he seemed to have understood. He nodded. "I see." He was the seventh swordsman. In Dali dynasty, he was just the seventh swordsman, the imperial advisor's direct disciple. That was all. That was why the imperial advisor sent his chief disciple Yan Yuan to escort him out. Their speed was so fast that others behind them were falling further and further behind, but these people's life forces were still fixed on them, and they refused to give up. A gust of depressing air befell the earth from the upper sky. Numerous people on the ground looked up but only heard a continuous deep roaring sound. What is that? A miracle. Numerous hearts trembled. People looked up to the sky, bewildered. Tens of thousands of golden dragons marched forward grandly, enveloping the sky. What a thrilling scene. Yan Yuan sensed the force and took a glance at the numerous holy golden dragons above. His life force had reached the climax at this point, and he was ready to take action. "Yan Yuan, keep going," a voice came from the figure that was standing above the sky. Suddenly, numerous dragons ceased their advance and let out a thundering roar. The figure appearing ahead stood still in the upper sky. It was as if no one could cross his shield as long as he was there. Yan Yuan said nothing and continued going forward. "Master," Yi Futian murmured. The next moment, he saw a boundless, astonishing pattern form around the imperial advisor's body. It was like a sacred matrix containing the 5 agents of yin and yang and the law of sky and earth. All the spirits of the world were suddenly sucked up. The magnificent matrix was erected in the upper sky and formed a barrier, blocking everyone's way. "Imperial advisor, your disciple is a spy of Emperor Xia's realm. Do you still want to keep me from capturing him?" the Prince Regent said loudly, his voice resounding between the sky and earth. It was as if he raised his voice intentionally so that everyone could hear it. "The seventh swordsman is my disciple. What did he do that let your highness come to arrest him in person?" "He didn't do anything, but he belongs to Emperor Xia realm." "Do you still want to be on his side?" asked Prince Regent. "My disciples are my disciples, regardless of their origin or background. All I know is the seventh swordsman is my disciple. Since he is my disciple and didn't do anything wrong, I will not allow anyone to harm him, even if the one who wishes to harm him is the Prince Regent," the imperial advisor announced. King Li and others gradually all arrived, but none could pass the imperial advisor's barrier. At this moment, the man who stood in front of them was the imperial advisor, second only to Emperor Li in Dali dynasty. Who dared to step forward? Li Yao looked toward the Dali imperial advisor, who was standing in front of him. Li Yao looked toward the Dali imperial advisor, who was standing in front of him. This man was like a natural barrier that no one was able to cross. The imperial advisor wanted to protect the seventh swordsman. Li Yao didn't understand it. Yuan Jin was also imperial advisor's disciple. Even though he didn't study with the imperial advisor for long, neither did the seventh swordsman. The imperial advisor didn't know the real identity of the seventh swordsman, but he still wanted to protect him. Li Yao just couldn't understand. It was not until he told the imperial advisor about Yi Futian's identity that the imperial advisor came to realize the reason why Yi Futian was requesting to leave. Because Yi Futian had let it go. The imperial advisor knew it was he who influenced the seventh swordsman and taught him to let the past go. The seventh swordsman even revealed some of his own secrets and put himself in danger to heal Fei Shui until he made up his mind to leave. Was it because of gratitude or vengeance? It was not easy to draw a conclusion. But the imperial advisor could see a rare virtue from the seventh swordsman. Yi Futian was Yi Futian in Emperor Xia's realm, and the seventh sword was the seventh sword in Emperor Li's realm. Vengeance was vengeance, but gratitude was gratitude. The seventh swordsman was able to tell the difference. Why couldn't the imperial advisor do so? The imperial advisor was the destined one, born with the ability to predict destiny. He was able to influence the fortune of Dali dynasty. The great law was boundless was the belief he held. The seventh swordsman inadvertently became his disciple less than 1 year ago. Still, the imperial advisor had a hunch that he would probably become the most eminent one among all his disciples in the future. Good. As the imperial advisor of Dali, you keep me from capturing a spy from Emperor Xia's realm. Are you trying to betray Dali? The prince regent's voice echoed in the sky, reaching very distant areas. Numerous people heard what he said. The people of Dali's hearts trembled. Was the venerated imperial advisor a defector to Dali? The ordinary people on the ground didn't know what had happened, and the prince regent's words were appalling to them. Even King Li was in shock. He stared ahead and felt that the prince regent was too ruthless. If the seventh swordsman really belonged to Emperor Xia's realm, it was likely that imperial advisor protected him purely out of a master's care for his disciple. In Dali, the imperial advisor was very trusted and respected by people, and he couldn't possibly commit treason. However, the prince regent, who had retired for many years, suddenly convicted him of treason, which might destroy the imperial advisor's reputation in Dali. But did the prince regent really care about Yi Futian? Not at all. The prince regent had no idea how outstanding Yi Futian really was. All he knew was that among all cultivators below Saint Plain, Yi Futian was the strongest. But he was at most a sage, and the gap between Yi Futian and the prince regent was still huge. The prince regent's intention for this accident was to frame the imperial advisor, or at least undermine the reputation imperial advisor had established and Emperor Li's trust in him. Anyway, at the end of the day, the last name of Dali imperial city's owner was Li. The imperial advisor could work for the dynasty, but he was not supposed to surpass any members of the Li clan in power. I will request to meet His Majesty after this affair is resolved, said the imperial advisor calmly. He stood there firmly, his body as the center. The colossal pattern that fell from the sky dome to the ground sealed the world and devoured all the roads, sucking up life forces in the space. The true dragon roared above the sky. Hundreds of thousands of divine dragons howled. They rushed forward and tried to shatter the imperial advisor's barrier. Numerous people looked at the shocking scene in the sky, their hearts racing. The prince regent and the imperial advisor, two legendary figures of Dali dynasty, were fighting. What did they fight for? Yi Futian didn't have a chance to witness the battle, but he knew that unless Emperor Li came to the lower worlds in person, he was safe under the imperial advisor's protection. Emperor Li didn't know what happened in the lower worlds, and even if he had known, would he enter the lower worlds just to arrest a young person of the Sage Plane? What would the people of Dali dynasty think of him? If the seventh swordsman had killed Li Yao, Emperor Li might do it. Even so, Yi Futian was not satisfied in his knowledge that he was safe, but rather, he felt burdened. He had given up killing Li Yao and made up his mind to leave Emperor Li's realm because he didn't want to involve the imperial advisor's residence in it. Still, he had never expected the imperial advisor to fight for him personally. Li Yao wasn't killed, so things weren't that serious. But in the end, it would still affect the imperial advisor. Now Yi Futian knew the imperial advisor didn't really care about repercussions since he had already taken action. Imperial advisor didn't care about fame and what people thought of him. Yan Yuan was in the ultimate status of the third Saint Plane, unblemished Saint Plane, so he could cross the void at a very fast speed. He was able to cover a very long distance in one stride. They didn't spend much time coming to the border of Dali dynasty of the lower worlds. On the border, many people were standing on a mountain. The demon beast, which shared a mind with Yi Futian, was there, too. Those people had received his message and were waiting for him. Your people? Asked Yan Yuan. Yes, said Yi Futian, nodding. Yan Yuan teleported to the front of the mountain and slightly pushed forward with his hand. Suddenly Yi Futian's body floated up and landed on the mountain. Yi Futian turned around and looked at Yan Yuan. Brother, Yi Futian called. Master said you are the seventh swordsman in Dali, but after you cross the border of Emperor Li's realm, I am no longer your brother, said Yan Yuan. The next time we meet, I don't have to show mercy to you. Yi Futian recovered his original countenance and his silver hair. His eyes were dark and bright. Although he didn't have the seventh sword's stunning looks, Yi Futian was more spirited and full of charisma. Yi Futian didn't mind his words and put on a smile, saying, the next time we meet, whether you want to show mercy or not, I will. Yan Yuan took a long look at Yi Futian, turned around and walked away, saying, no need. Seeing the statuesque person leaving, Yi Futian bowed at Yan Yuan and said, it was my great honor to have entered the imperial advisor's residence. If, one day, the imperial advisor's residence faces difficulties, I will definitely come back to help. That figure was silent as he walked further and further away. After a while, a voice came. No need. The short reply put a bright smile on Yi Futian's face. It was fortunate for the world of cultivation to have the 33-stroke swords master of Lihan Heaven in Emperor Xia's realm and Dali imperial advisor in Emperor Li's realm. It was also Yi Futian's fortune to meet these two elders who truly changed his state of heart. Goodbye, brother, Yi Futian said and then turned around. The name, the Seventh Swordsman, was well known all over Dali dynasty of the lower worlds. He has been famous when he was still in the lower worlds. He was the man with a sword who defeated all others in the Dali 9 states. No one had expected that he would still be peerless after he entered the upper worlds. He was considered the strongest below the Saint Plane. The imperial advisor took him as a direct disciple. Emperor Li betrothed his own daughter to him, but he declined. What was more amazing was that the seventh swordsman belonged to Emperor Xia's realm, and after his identity was exposed, the imperial advisor escorted him out in person. What a dreamy story. What kind of being was he? A man with so much talent and charisma. In Dali Empire, the atmosphere of Emperor Li's imperial city was very depressing. The imperial advisor, Prince Regent, Li Yao, Yan Yuan, and others had returned from the lower worlds. Rumors of what had happened spread across the city. People were in shock. The strongest cultivator of Sage Plane, the imperial advisor's disciple, the seventh sword, was Yi Futian from Emperor Xia's realm. This name sounded unfamiliar to many in Emperor Li's realm. Still, people who experienced the Empty Realm battle all knew that it was Yi Futian who contributed to the victory of Emperor Xia's realm. A peerless talent. He changed his profession to study swordsmanship and gained fame in Dali dynasty, but nobody had even figured out he changed his identity. Emperor Li had been unaware when he met Yi Futian in person. What tricks had he used that deceived everyone? What was more astonishing was that after his identity was uncovered, the imperial advisor helped him leave. His charisma was truly amazing. With these experiences, the seventh swordsman was a real legend. At this moment, the people of Dali Imperial City fixed their eyes on Emperor Li's palace. Would Emperor Li rage at the imperial advisor? Although no one would believe that the imperial advisor committed treason, and Emperor Li could understand and trust the imperial advisor, it was inevitable for His Majesty to be concerned. In Emperor Li's palace, the Dali imperial advisor, the Prince Regent, Yan Yuan, Li Yao were all present. They stood there without a word. Emperor Li stood on the stairs and looked down at them. Your Majesty, the imperial advisor let the spy of Emperor Xia's realm go and even stopped us from capturing him. I suspect he has committed treason. Your Majesty, please convict him for his crime, the Prince Regent said loudly. He knew he couldn't destroy the imperial advisor by using the thing that happened today. Others knew this as well. But even though he couldn't destroy the imperial advisor, Prince Regent still wanted to sow the seeds of alienation in His Majesty's heart. Emperor Li was the ruler of Dali Empire. He allowed no betrayal. Your Majesty, the seventh swordsman cultivated in the imperial advisor's residence, so he was my disciple. He never did anything improper during his stay. As his master, when I saw His Highness go to capture him, I asked Yan Yuan to escort him to safety. Your Majesty, please convict me of my crime, said the imperial advisor. He confessed. I know that imperial advisor cherished him as a talent and didn't have the heart to see him arrested, but the seventh swordsman belongs to Emperor Xia's realm, and he will be a potential danger after he goes back, said Emperor Li. How will you deal with him if you meet him in the future? He was my disciple, the seventh swordsman, in Dali. Since I have escorted him out, from now on, he will no longer have any relationship with me, replied the imperial advisor. Emperor Li nodded and looked at the Prince Regent, asking, Do you have anything to say, uncle? Your Majesty, the imperial advisor emphasized their master-student relationship and deliberately ignored mentioning his own defects, said Prince Regent. Your Majesty fully trusts and reveres the imperial advisor. When he decided to establish Dali National Academy, Your Majesty made all efforts to support him educating talents. But isn't he helping Emperor Xia's realm now? I am willing to resign my position as the Dean of Dali National Academy. Yan Yuan followed my orders and was involved in the issue today, so he will also go back to Imperial Advisor's residence for cultivation to avoid bringing controversy to the Academy, said the Imperial Advisor. It shouldn't have been considered a severe misdeed, but rather something brought about by negative influence. There was no choice but to give up something. The imperial advisor had sensed the result before the actual events occurred, and now what he was doing was following the trend of things. Since the imperial advisor said so, uncle, how about putting an end to it? Let someone else take over the job of Dali Academy, Emperor Li said to the Prince Regent. Since Emperor Li had given his opinion, the Prince Regent immediately understood what to do next. He took a bow and said, Always regard your wisdom. You may leave, announced Emperor Li. The imperial advisor, the Prince Regent, and others soon all left. Li Yao turned around and looked into the distance, perplexed. He was the most pitiful one in this incident. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.